Hello everyone. Welcome. Hi Swapnilji, how are you? Welcome. Here is a good name. Good morning. How are you? Have a good day. Welcome everyone. Comments a beautiful name. How are you? Hello dear Tia. How are you? Here is a beautiful name. Hi dear Erica. How are you? Here is your good name. Hi, dear Nelly. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. Hello, dear Bhupendra. Bhupendra. Good morning. How are you? Here is a beautiful name. Hi, dear Rihan. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Sadia. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Akshu. Here is yours. Hi, dear Monte. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Nitya, here is yours. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. How are you all? Hi, dear Nikhil. Here is your beautiful name. Hello, dear Crystal. Welcome back. How are you? Hi, dear Sophie. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Sap. Here is yours. Ah, you're most welcome. Thank you. Hi, how are you? Hello, dear Fizia. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Susie. Here is yours. Hello, dear Arham. Here is your good name. Thank you so much, dear Crystal. My name is Ishar. Hi, dear Alan. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Jalen. Alan and Jalen, such a rhyming names. Welcome. Hello, dear Yashvi. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Komal. Here is yours. Hi, dear Gursi. Here, Gursirat. What a beautiful name you have. Here is yours. Hi, dear Rishwa. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Rai. Here is yours. Thank you so much for subscribing. Hello, dear Komal. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Khadija. Here is yours. How are you? Hi, dear Isaac. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear. Let's see who is next. Amya. Here is yours. Hi, dear Golu. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Marva. Here is yours. Hello, dear Raj. Here is a good name. Hi, dear Saf. Here is yours. Hello, dear Daisy. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Matilde. Let me check the spelling of your name. What a unique name you have. Matilde. Or Matilde. Sorry if I mispronounce your name. Here is your good name. Hello, dear Aisha. Here is yours. Hi, dear Jamil. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Imasha. Here is your good name. Hello, dear Susie. Here is yours. Hi, dear Taonga. Welcome back. How are you? It is a good name. Hello, dear Naya. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Daslin. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining. Hello, dear Myra. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Sumit. Here is yours. Hello, dear Hershita. Here is your good name. Let's see who is next. Hi, dear Alexis. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Yumiko. Here is yours. Thank you for joining. Hello, dear Akshita. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Aman. Here is yours. Hi, dear Zainab. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Minahil. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Right? Hi, dear Srija. Here's a good name. Hello, dear Tamanna. Here is a good name. Hi, dear Sophia. Here is yours. Hi, dear Paswan. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Asad. Here is yours. Hello, dear Aksa. Here's your good name. Hi, dear Melek. Here is yours. Hi, dear Rabia. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Samrat. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining. Hi, dear Mylan. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Natalia. I am doing good. Here is your beautiful name. Thank you so much for joining, dear. Here is yours. Hi, dear Malek. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Layla. Here is yours. Hi, dear Seher. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Tia. Here is yours. Hi, dear Johan. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear uh, Ifa. Here is yours. Hello, dear Aviraj. How are you? Have a good day. Hi, dear Shabina. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Langa. Here is yours. Hi, dear. Fine, good to hear. Hui Flot. Here is yours. Hello, dear Uh, Let me check the spelling. Welcome back, dear Anaya. Here is yours. Long time no see. How are you doing? Hi, dear Mizan. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Avantika. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining, dear Avantika. Hi, dear Gopi. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Aki. Here is yours. Hello, dear Subhash. Here is a good name. Hi, dear Manha. Here is yours. Hi, dear Sharika. Here is your good name. Hello, dear Maida. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining. Hi, dear Suba. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Joy. Here is yours. Thank you so much for the compliment. Love you. Hi, dear Miriam. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Emmy. Here is yours. Hello, dear Adarsh. Here is your beautiful name. Thank you so much for joining, Adarsh. Hi, dear Janet. Here is yours. Hello, dear Apiram. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining. It is a beautiful name. Hi, dear Yogita. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. Don't forget to double tap on your screens. And there is a subscribe button waiting for your finger press. Hello, dear ZS. Hi, dear BTS. This is for you, dear Army. Hi, dear Abhay. Here is your beautiful name. Hello, dear Emily. Here is yours. Hi, Emily. How are you? Hello, dear Utica. Here is yours. Hi, dear Sam. Here is a good name. Hi, dear Ananya. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Delha. Here is yours. Hi, dear Arman. Here is your beautiful name. Hello, dear Sham. Here is yours. Hi, dear Dave. Here is a good name. Hi, dear Connie. Kanai. Oh, what's your name? Here is yours. Hi, dear Advika. Here is your good name. Double tap on your screens and don't forget to press the subscribe button there. Hi, dear Yash. Here is a good name. Hi, dear Kamish. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Suman. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining. Hi, dear Yani. ¿Cómo estás? Hi, dear Minahil. Here is your beautiful name. Hello, dear Hamad. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining, dear Hamad. Let's see who is next. Hi, can you do? Charlotte. Why not, dear Charlotte? Hello, dear Charlotte. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Sheba. Here is yours. Hello, dear Ryan. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Llama. Here is yours. Hi, dear Cloppy. What a unique name you have. Here is yours. You're most welcome. Thank you. Hello, dear Lucy. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Anshu. Here is yours. Hi, dear Sala. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Meher. Here is yours. Hi, dear Yumi. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Hawa. Here is yours. Hawa, your name is on the thumbnail for this live, dear. How are you? Hi, dear Piku. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Nafisa. Here is yours. Hi, dear Layla. Here is your beautiful name. No, I'm not Kurdish. Hi, dear Kashish. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. Don't forget to double tap on your screens. Hello, dear Mima. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Sala. Here is yours. Hello, dear Cooper. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Lisa. Here is yours, dear Blank. Hi, dear Sakina. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Qasim. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining. Hi, dear Akbar. Here is your beautiful name. Hello, dear Jenny. Here is yours. Hi, dear Hussein. Here is your beautiful name. Thank you so much for joining. Hi, dear Tanu. Here is yours. Don't forget to double tap on your screens. Let's see who is next. Hi, dear Rayan. Here is yours. Walaikum assalam. I am good. How about you? Hello, dear Sibkaji. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Vihan. Here is yours. Hi, dear Serena. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Shamya. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining. Hi, dear Drishti. Thank you so much. Hello, dear Elma. Here is a good name. Hi, dear Hiba. Here is yours. Hi, dear Nidhi. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Scarlett. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. Don't forget to like and press that subscribe button. Let's see who is next. Hi, dear Okta. Here is yours. Good to hear, Supaji. Hello, dear Paulina. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Umar. Here is yours. Hello, dear Eleanor. Here is your beautiful name. Thank you so much for joining, and so sorry if I mispronounce your name. Hello, dear Hareen. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Ferdine. Here is yours. Why not, dear Drishti? What's a good name? Hi, dear Bite. Bite is your name? Hi, dear Hilal. Here is your beautiful name. Hello, dear Umar. Here is yours. Hi, dear Santek. Here is your good name. Literally, Sivkaji. Hi, dear Emily. Here is yours. Hi, welcome. Hello, dear Ray. Here is a good name. Hi, dear Airbaz. Here is your beautiful name. Thank you for subscribing. What is your beautiful name, dear? Hi, dear Muhammad. Here is your beautiful name. Let's see who is next. Hi, dear Falak. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Kajal. Here is yours. Hi, dear. Okay, okay. Same name for you. My name is Kristen. Hello, dear Kristen. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear others. Here is yours. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Crimson. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining. Hi. here is yours. Hello, dear Lisa. Here is your beautiful name. Oh, the stream is lagging. Nobody's telling me. Zeke. Hello, dear Zeke. Here is yours. Yay, thank you. You're most welcome, dear. Lots of love. The stream is lagging, so let's turn out the Wi-Fi on of the another phone. Hi, Drishti. Welcome. Hi, dear Drishti. Here is your beautiful name. Guys, is the stream is still lagging? Hi, dear Chaitan. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Isha. Here is yours. Hello, dear Sophia. Here is your beautiful name. You're most welcome, dear Sahra. Hi, dear Husna. Here is yours. You're most welcome. Such a sweetheart you are. Bandita. Hello, dear Bandita. Here is a beautiful name. Hi, dear Asim. Here is yours. Let's see who is next. Hi, dear Yuzi. Here is your beautiful name. Hello, dear Anmol. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Hi, dear Hamza. Here is your beautiful name. Stream is lagging. Hi, dear Mosem. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining. Hello, dear. Hi, Asia. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Herman. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining. And don't forget to double tap on your screens. Nafisa. Hello, dear Nafisa. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Ayush. Here is yours. Hello, dear Alia. Here is your good name. It's not lagging. Oh, thank God. Thank God it's not lagging. Hi, dear Rawaisy. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. Don't forget to double tap on your screens. Oh my god, too much comments. Jasmine. Hi, dear Jasmine. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Nadia. Here is yours. Hi, dear Ram. It is a good name. Hello, dear Dasha. Here is yours. Hello. What's a good name? Masab. Hello, dear Masab. Here is yours. Hi, dear Zoe. Here is a good name. Hello, another Lela. How are you? Here is yours. You're most welcome, dear. Hi, dear Kevin. Here is a good name. Okay, bye. Hello, dear Flying. Here is your Take care. Hi, dear. Joanna is done now. Shweta, what's your name? Is your name is Shweta? Hi, dear Kamran. Here is yours. Hello, dear Avni. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Pigeon. Here is yours. Welcome back. How are you doing today? Hi, dear Arman. Here is your beautiful name. Okay, Shweta. Hello, dear Shweta. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining, dear Shweta. Don't forget to double tap on your screens. Hi, dear Sagar. Here is your beautiful name. Hello, dear Atlas. Here is yours. Hi, dear Mocha. Here is your beautiful name. Hey, dear Zami. Here is yours, double MY. Hello, dear Babies is your name? Hi, dear Kirti. Here is your beautiful name. Hello, dear Berfin. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining. Hello, dear Preston. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Mocha. Okay. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. Don't forget to double tap on your screens. No. Hi, dear Mia. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Gilberto. Here is yours. Hi, dear Samira. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Hendrik. Here is yours. Hi, dear Maria. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Rushda. Here is yours. Hi, dear George. Thank you so much for subscribing. Here is a good name, dear Georgie. Let's see who is next. Hi, dear Charlie. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Sandra. Here is yours. Let's see who is next. Hi, dear Asset. Here is your Asset. Good name. Hi, dear Nadia. Here is yours. You're most welcome, dear. Thank you. Hi, dear Anas. Here is your beautiful name. Hello, dear Yasmin. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining. Hello, dear Anas. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Asmiza. Here is yours. You're most welcome. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Good morning. I watched yesterday and I was waiting for my name, Athena. Thank you so much for your patience and thank you for joining again, dear. It is a beautiful name. Let's see who is next. Hi, dear Amina. How are you? It is a good name. Thank you for joining. Hi, dear Zeba. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Hasiber. Here is yours. Hello, dear Rumana. Here is your beautiful name. Hello, dear Adam. Here is yours. Hi, dear Monique. It is a beautiful name. Thank you for joining again, dear Monique. How are you? Hello, dear. What's your name? APOPO. Ah, is this your name? Let's see who's next. Wait, is your voice fluent and rhythm cutting due to net? Otherwise, normally can't free. Network is not networking. Oh, it's you again. Hope you're having an amazing day. Welcome back, dear Kevin. How are you? Have a good day to you too. It is a beautiful name. Thank you so much for joining again. Hi, dear Ishwari. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Kase. Here is yours. Hello, dear Jasmine. Here is your beautiful name. My, what is yours, dear? Hi, dear Maddie. Here is yours. Hi, dear Shruti. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Christy. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining. Hi, dear Mary. Here is your good name. Be rather. Hi, dear Be rather. Here is yours. What a unique name you have. Hello, dear Sophia. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Gazala. Here is yours. Hi, dear Emma. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Rose. here is yours. Hello, dear Sana, here is your good name. Hi, dear Farah, here is yours. Hi, dear Manasa, here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Huma. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining. You're most welcome, dear. Don't forget to double tap on your screens, and there is a subscribe button waiting for you to press, guys. Hi, dear Zainab. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Free. Here is yours. Hi, dear Celeste. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Albert. Here is yours. Hello, dear Yuki. Here is your beautiful name. Oh, hope she recover soon. Hi, dear Aisha. Here is yours. Hello, dear Adam is here. Hello, dear Akbar. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Tehsin. Here is yours. Hi, dear Sufyan. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Ari. Here is yours. Hello, dear Bella. Here is a good name. Hi, dear Ritika. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining. Hi, dear Huma. Here is your beautiful name. Let's see who is next. Guys, double tap on your screens and don't forget to press the subscribe button there. Liana. Hi, dear Liana. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Ronnie. Here is yours. Okay, take care. Have a good day. Hi, dear Alifa. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Umar. Here is yours. Let's see who is next. Megha. Hello, dear Megha. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Nancy. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining. Hi, dear Bhumika. It is a good name. Let's see who is next. Zaidan. Hello, dear Zaidan. What a unique name you have. Here is yours. Hi, dear Erman. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Hamzilla. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining. Hello, dear Alice. Here is your good name. Hello, dear Fair Jelly. Here is yours. Thank you for joining. Hi, welcome. Let's see who is next. Ganesh. Hello, dear Ganesh. Here is a good name. Hi, dear Bisma. Here is a beautiful name. Hello, dear Falak. Here is yours. Hi, dear Luffy. Here is a beautiful name. Luffy with double F. Here is yours. Hi, dear Dia. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Komal. Here is yours. Hi, dear Ansa. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Sadik. Here is yours. Hi, dear Harper. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear. Huh? Vivita, here is yours. Hello, dear Sanudi. Here is your good name. Hello, dear Arabi. Here is yours, Arabi with double A. What a unique name you have, dear Arabi. Thank you for joining. Hello, dear A and L. Here is yours. Hi, dear Igoric. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Lisa. Here is yours. Hi, dear Grace. Welcome back. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Anvisha. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining. Double tap on your screens and good morning. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Rose. Hi, dear Shaula. Shala. Here is yours. Good morning. Hi, dear Anika. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Chandan. Here is yours. Hello, dear Felix. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Anne. Here is yours. Hi, dear Saud. Here is your beautiful name. Thank you so much for joining, dear Saud. Let's see who is next. Megha. Here is yours. Hi, dear Ahmed. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Citra. Here is yours. Hello, dear Pooja. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Pooja is done, and Halima. Hello, dear Halima. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Sophia. Here is yours for you, dear Blink. Let's see who is next. Hi, dear Yusuf. Here is your good name. Hello, dear Isabel. Here is yours. Thank you for joining. Hi, dear Nafisa. Here is your good name. Don't use too much emojis, dear Friday. Gracias. ¿Cómo estás? Hello, dear Akila. Here is yours. Hi, dear Mahan. Here is your beautiful name. Hello, dear Rosario. Here is yours. Hi, dear Medina. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Sumaya. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I don't know this much Spanish, but I just know gracias and cómo estás. Manva, here is yours. Hi, dear Yusuf. Here is your beautiful name. Hello, dear Jenny. Jenny, just get in the car. Hi, dear Aziza. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Anissa. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. Don't forget to double tap on your screens. Yana. Hi, dear Yana. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Riza. Here is yours. You're most welcome, dear. Thank you. Hello, dear Zaya. Here is yours. Hi, dear Abiha. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, hola. Soy Sofia, mi prima. Kumple announce Sofia and Prima. Here is yours. Hello, dear Manjari, what was the name? What a unique name you have. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. Don't forget to double tap and press the bell icon. Oh, subscribe button. Hi, dear Lala. Here is a good name. Hi, dear Leonie. Here is yours. Hi, dear Aisha. Here is a beautiful name. Hello, dear Himesh. Here is yours. Hi, dear Gulu. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear. Oh my god, please don't spam, dear Adarsh. Hi, dear Andre. Here is yours. Hello, dear Riri. Ah, no, Lily. Oh god. Here is a good name. Let me check the comment. Hi. You write Zia. Okay, okay, Zia. Hello, Master D. Welcome back. Uh, Zia. Here is your sorry, Mozambique. I just missed your comment. Priya. Hi, dear Priya. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Maz. Here is yours. Hi, dear Sabrina. Here is your beautiful name. Master D is back. How are you? My my name is Ishal. Let's see who is next. Daddy. Hi, dear Daddy. Here is a good name. Hello, dear Mira. Here is yours. I am Lily, and my good name is Ishal. Hi, dear Asia. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining. Hello, dear Selena. It is a good name. Oh, it's okay. Let's see who is next. Anira. Hi, dear Anira. Here is a good name. Hi, dear Yusuf. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. Double tap on your screens and don't forget to press the subscribe button. Hi, Ishal. No, Ishal. It starts with Eshal. Hi, dear Param. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Eliezer. Here is yours. I am good. How about you, dear? What's a good name? Latte. Hi, dear Latte. Here is your good name. Thank you so much for asking. Hi, dear Fushi. Here is yours. Hello, dear niece. It is a good name. Hi, dear. Sing it. Sing it. Here is yours. What a unique name you have. Thank you so much, dear. Hi, dear Salim. Here is a beautiful name. Hi, dear Cherry. Here is yours. Hi, dear Calf. Here is a beautiful name. Hi, dear Roshni. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining. Don't forget to double tap on your screens. Just give me 1 minute. Thank you so much for joining. And let's see who is next. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. Double tap on your screens. Kanaya. Here is yours. Hi, dear April. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Mustafa. Here is yours. Mozambique, can you hear me? Hi, dear Shalom. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Nazia. Here is yours. Hi, dear. Let's see who is next. Hannah. Hannah is one of my favorite names. Welcome back, dear Hannah. Here is yours. Jaslyn. Hi, dear Jaslyn. How are you? Here is yours. What's your name, dear? Okay, thank you for telling. Hi, dear Vasid. Here is yours. Let me check your spelling. EVELLYNLAYS. Here is yours. Hi, dear Maddie. Here is your good name. Hello, dear Epsy. Here is yours. Hi, dear Haley. Here is your good name. Thank you so much for subscribing. Hi, Radheshamji. Welcome back. Hi, dear Avinash. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Mia, here is yours. Hi, dear Joes, here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Nada, here is your beautiful name. Hi, I'm good, how about you? Hello, dear Ahil, here is yours. Hello, dear Janelia, here is your good name. Hi, dear Fiza. Here is yours. Fine, good to hear. Hello, dear Dildar. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Abdullah. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining. Double tap on your screens. We have to complete 100 words. Come on. Hi, dear Vanessa. Here is a good name. Hi, dear Pista. Here is yours. Did you remember me? I am Farva. Yeah, dear Farva. How are you? It is a good name. Hi, dear William. Here is your beautiful name. Hello, dear Felix. Here is yours. Felix. It is a good name. Hi, dear Nina. Here is your beautiful name. Hello, dear Lover. Here is yours. Hi, dear Omkar. Here is your beautiful name. Didi. Hi, welcome. Hello, dear Iman. It is a good name. So, could you translate it for me? Hi, dear Arya. Here is yours. You're most welcome. Thank you. Lots of love. Let's see who is next. Jessica. Hi, dear Jessica. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Satya. Here is your. Let's see who's gonna be the 100 liker. Thank you, Jamshade. Hi, dear Jamshade. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Jenny. Hello, dear Dennis. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Kashi. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining. Hello, dear Manas. Here is yours. Yeah, I quit for 2 months, but I am officially back right now. Hi, dear Sridhi. Here is yours. Hello, dear Sakina. Here is your beautiful name. Hi dear Kinza, here is yours. Hi dear Kapil, here is your good name. Thank you so much for joining everyone. Double tap on your screen. Let's see who's gonna be the 100 liker. Thanks, you're most welcome. This is for you. Please try e-signatures 100k. For you? Okay. Hi dear Ayushma, here is yours. Hi dear Salu, here is your good name. Salu, okay. Hi dear Muslima, here is yours. Hi dear Ariana, where were you? Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining again, dear. Here is your good name. Hi dear Sofa, here is yours. Hello dear Ovi, here is your beautiful name. Hi dear Daphne, here is yours. Hello dear Srinidhi, here is your beautiful name. Srinidhi. Hi dear Happy, here is yours. Stay blessed always. Hi dear Hadia, here is your beautiful name. Hi dear Aubrey, here is yours. Thank you so much for joining. Hi dear Ake, here is your good name. Hello dear Jabe, here is yours. Ake and Jabe, what are rhyming names? Okay, okay, for you. For you, dear Ariana. Let's see who is next. Thank you so much for joining, Joveria. Hi dear Joveria, here is your beautiful name. How are you? Hi dear Maham, here is your good name. Hi dear Brianna, here is yours. Thank you so much dear Brianna for joining. Hi dear Carlson, here is your beautiful name. Hi dear Kavya, here is yours. Just let me refresh. Hi dear Anza, here is your beautiful name. Hi dear Isha Fatima, here is yours. Thank you for joining. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Hi dear Lily, here is your beautiful name. Hi dear. Let me drink some water. Isha, just give me 1 second, guys. Stay hydrated. हैं स्क्रीन कास्ट बेस्ट है सिक्का जी सिक्का जी स्क्रीन कास्ट पे जाइए बेस्ट ऑप्शन है बेस्ट हाय डियर मेरा हियर इज अ ब्यूटीफुल नेम क्योंकि आवाज़ और हाथ के बगैर स्क्रीन कास्ट टाइप का ऑप्शन बहुत अच्छा है हाय डियर समीरा हियर इज योर्स हाय डियर उमर हियर इज अ ब्यूटीफुल नेम Hi dear Dylan, here is yours. Hi dear. Let's see who is next. Friday. Here is yours. Hi dear Amina. क्या हाँ ना Chords डाले ना chords. Oh, you're most welcome. Let's see who is next. Gul. Hello, dear Gul. Here is yours. Hi, dear Faiz. Here is your good name. हेलो डियर सल्लू जी, आपका नाम लिख दिया था हमने। ग्रासियास। ठहरें ठहरें, आपने लिखा क्या है? Dylan, sorry, I don't understand this much Spanish. What is the meaning of this? Hi, dear Ali. Ali and Rosa. Here is yours. Here we go again. Welcome back. How are you? Hi, dear Ali Rosa. Here is yours. Hello, dear Usama. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Mahin. Here is yours. Mahin. Hello, dear Rabia. Here is your beautiful name. Hello, dear Salin. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining. Subgaji, I think I just missed your comment. So sorry. Umar was done, bro. If you want a screenshot, go for it, or you can take it later. Hey, dude, right, Zaryab. Hi. Welcome. How are you doing? Zaryab. It is yours. Ayat, welcome back. How are you? एक मिनट, मुझे पढ़ लेने दें. हाँ हाँ, सेम फ़ोन से कमेंट नहीं कर सकते. Yashika. Hi, dear Yashika. How are you? It is a good name. भाई का ले लेना जिब्गा जी, अगर दे तो. Hi, dear Jeremia. Let me check the spelling. It is a beautiful name. Hi, dear Aksa. Here is a beautiful name. Hi, dear Neha. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And let's see who is next. Ma'am, कैसी हैं आप? मैं ठीक हूँ, आप कैसे हैं? Thank you so much for asking. Hello, dear Abby. Here is a good name. Lily, another Lily. Hi, dear Lily. Here is yours. Hello, I am good. How about you? As Sadi. Here is yours. हाँ ये भी है. Hi, dear Rhyme. Here is a beautiful name. Hello, dear Adib. Here is yours. मैंने एक मिनट. मैम, आपने कल भी मेरा नेम लिखा था. थैंक्स. अरे रोज लिखूंगी, रोज आना. Thank you. Hi, dear Lana. Here is a good name. Hi, dear Sandy. Here is yours. You can call me Shal. Hello, dear Hasrat. Here is yours. Hi, dear Iman. Here is a good name. Hi, dear Carla. Here is yours. कौन सा? Hi, dear Prayub. Here is your beautiful name. Hello, dear Mark. Here is yours. Hi, dear Mahin. Here is your beautiful name. Hello, dear Shahid. Here is yours. Let's see who is next. Hi, dear Candy. Here is your tasty name. Hi, dear Aiza. Here is yours. Hello, dear Mariam. Here is your beautiful name. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. Don't forget to double tap on your screens. Hi, dear Asma. Here is yours. Hello, dear Chaya. Here is your beautiful name. क्या नाम था? Nafisa. Nafisa, your name was done twice, I think. Hi, dear Naya. Here is yours. Hello, dear Irfan. Here is your beautiful name. Hiram. Hi, dear Hiram. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining. Hello, dear Afra. Here is your beautiful name. Thank you so much for joining again, dear Afra. Hi, dear Taru. Here is yours. Hello, dear Sakura. Hi, Isha. Please do, Ariza. Lovely flow after a century. How are you? Let me write Ariza for you. How are you, dear? It is a good name, and you have such a beautiful name, dear Ariza. Thank you so much for joining again. Hi, dear Anya. Here is a good name. Hi, I'm sorry. I'm good. I'm sorry. I haven't come to any stream recently. I've been quite busy. Oh, it's okay. It's okay. Take care of yourself. Enjoy your life, dear. Hi, dear Abru. Here is yours. Hi, dear Aiden. Here's a good name. Hi, dear Rabia. Here is a beautiful name. Hello, dear Akaso. Here is yours. Thank you for joining. Hello, dear Laziza. Here is a beautiful name. Hi, dear Alice. Here is yours. Thank you so much. What a beautiful new setup you have. Oh no, this is the old one, I think. Yeah, I just changed the tray. Hi, dear. Who's crying? I. Yeah. Here is yours. Hi, dear Arab. Here is yours. Another Lily we have. Hello, dear Lily. Here is yours. Hi, dear Nihal. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Leanda. Here is yours. So much for joining, and the stream is again lagging. Oh, God. Oh, mommy. Oh, it's fine now. Hi, dear Aska. Here is a good name. Sis, वो पत्थर के टूटा कब है? मैंने कब बोला टूटा है? डायमंड इसे जरा क्लीन करता है, इससे बाहर नहीं गिरता क्योंकि इसके जो एजेस हैं वो थोड़े से ऊपर हैं। वो जो स्टोन था ना उससे बार बार नीचे गिरता था और फिर डांट बड़ी पड़ती थी मुझे। फिर मुझे ये वाली जो चादर है ये बार बार वॉश करनी पड़ती थी उसकी वजह से, क्योंकि वो कलर सैंड थी तो उसका कलर आ जाता था। Hi, Idale. Here is a good name. Hello, dear Maheen. Here is yours. Hi, dear BDS for you. Here is yours. Double tap on your screens and don't forget to press the subscribe button there. Ritika. Hi, dear Ritika. Here is your good name. Well, it's already AM for me. I am so tired, but I will come to the stream in 2 days. I have much going on today. Take care of yourself. Take some good rest, dear. It's okay, and good night. TVD, not yet. Hi, dear Jaila. Here is yours. Is it available on YouTube? And which kind of series these are? Hi, dear Arkan. Here is yours. Hello, dear Carolina. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Olivia. Here is yours. Hi, dear Elma. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Satvika. Here is yours. Hello, dear Amna. Here is your beautiful name. Amna and Amisha. Thank you. You're most welcome, dear. Laziza. Okay, Laziza. Here is yours. Don't be sad. Double tap on your screen. Don't forget to like and subscribe. You must watch a most amazing series. Is it available on YouTube or which kind of series is this? Hi, dear Jack. Here is yours. क्या लिखा है समझ में नहीं आया मुझे. Hi, dear Zainab. Here is yours. Only Netflix now. I don't watch Netflix. I don't have enough time to watch anything except my YouTube channel and comments of yours or making content for YouTube. Hi, dear Alia. Here is yours. Hello, dear Aisha. Here is a good name. Yes, Yuga ji. आपके लिए पकड़ लो अब. मसी जी ऐसा करना कि फिल्म देख लेना ड्रामा तरीक पर बिल्कुल नहीं उसको हैं. Hi, dear Larry. Here is yours. अजीज़ा अभी अभी आपका नाम लिखा था प्यारी अजीज़ा. Hi, dear Larry. Here is yours. Hi, dear Wayan. Here is a good name. Thank you so much for joining. Hi, welcome. What's a good name? नहीं बिल्कुल नहीं मोजिम भाई. Hello, dear Christy. What's a good name? Teja. Hi, dear Teja. Here is yours. Hello, dear Nabila. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Natalia. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining. Don't forget to double tap on your screens. And let's see who is next. Hi, hola. Here is yours. Hi, dear Sanchi. Here is your beautiful name. Hello, dear Ayat. Here is yours. Hi, dear Prab. Here is a good name. Prab with B. Prabh. Ignore the background noises. Hello, dear Elif Naz. Here is a beautiful name. Are you from Turkey, dear? Hello, dear Shaksu. Here is yours. What a unique name you have. Thanks, dear. You're most welcome. Hi, dear Godwin. Here is a beautiful name. Hello, dear Ika. Here is yours. Hi, dear Farid. Here is a good name. Hello, dear Arhama. Here is yours. Hi, dear Yusuf. Here is a beautiful name. Hi, dear Shahamir. Here is yours. Hello, dear Bella. Here is your beautiful name. Let's see who is next. Double tap on your screens. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Kiran. Hi, dear Kiran. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Sumin. Here is yours. Hello, dear Chloe. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Pavan. Here is yours. Hi, dear Amadullah. How are you? Here is your good name. Thank you so much for joining. Hi, dear Asya. Here is yours. Hello, dear Alif. Here is yours. I am good too. Thank you so much for joining. Thanks for asking. Hi, dear Anaya. Here is your good name. Hello, dear Radhya. Here is yours. Hello, dear Zainab and Zubia. Zubia and Zainab. For you, here is yours. Hi, dear Nirjala. How are you? It is a good name. Let me change the brush. Hi, dear Trisha. Here is your beautiful name. Hello, dear Rabia. Here is yours. Hi, dear Connor. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Ashab. Here is yours. Thank you. Glad you liked it, dear. Hi, dear Umar. Here is your beautiful name. Maybe Ash. Hey, dear Ash. Here is yours. Hi, dear Kalisa. Here is a good name. Hi, dear Sukuna. Here is your beautiful name. Hello, dear Ralph. Here is yours. Guys, double tap on your screens and don't forget to press the subscribe button. Hello, dear Talha. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Vegu. Let me check the spelling. Vangu. Here is yours. Hi, dear Arfa. Here is your beautiful name. Hello, dear Khadija. Here is yours. You're most welcome, dear Ash. Hi, dear Usman or Ushman. Here is yours. Hi, dear Gojo, dear enemy lover. How are you doing today? Hello, dear Arya. Here is your beautiful name. Don't forget to double tap on your screen. What is my name? My name is Ishal. Hi, dear Sheriff. Here is your beautiful name. Hello, dear Anisha. Here is yours. Hi, dear Nova. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Neetu. Here is your. We are literally stuck on 128. Oh my god. Double tap on your screens. Oh my god, why is Nightbird giving the timeout? Let me check him. Nightbird, why are you giving the timeout? Sindhu. So sorry, Sindhu. Here is your beautiful name. Hi, dear Gopi. Here is yours. Hello, dear Jadri. Here is your beautiful name. Guys, ignore the background noises. Moti. Hello, dear Moti. Here is a good name. Hi, dear James. Here is yours, Ravindra Singh. Welcome, Ravindra Singh. Devendra. Kiਵੇਂ ਹੋ ਤੁਸੀਂ? Here is yours. आवाज आ रही है ना? ये प्रेशर चल रहा है हमारे घर का प्रेशर कुकर. कितनी देर में बंद होगा? क्या क्या? Hello, dear elf. Here is yours. First time I can't hear background noise. Oh, literally. Thank God. Hi, dear Ishal. Here is a good name. Hi, dear Khadija. Here is yours. Thanks for my name. You're most welcome. Hi, dear Uh, Atik, here is yours. Just wait for a minute, Sandy, or maybe a second. Hello, dear Sandy. Here is your good name. Hi, dear Risha. Risha, thank you for subscribing, dear. It is a good name. What is yours? Hi, dear Mac. Here is your good name. Hello, dear Anastasia. Here is yours. Hi, dear Triumph. Here is yours. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. Let's see who's next. Hi, dear Ali. Here is yours. You are from Arun. Arun. ठीक है you are better at writing in fan than I can on paper. It's okay. पेपर में मेरी भी ऐसी है. Same. रोशनी. Hi, dear Roshni. Here is your beautiful name. Hello, dear Tahir. Here is yours. Hi, dear Shadow. Here is your beautiful name. Hello, dear Dwamit. नहीं क्या Dwarmit. Hi, Jalis. How are you? Guys, double tap on your screens and don't forget to press the subscribe button. Muslim Bhai, really? Hi, dear Raya. Here is your beautiful name. Oh, you're most welcome, dear. Double tap on your screens. And now it's time to end the stream, and we are looking for the last name for the streams, which is Lala. Hi, Venus. Hello, Sehan. Hamda. And our last name for this stream is Hamda. Ignore the background noises. Now we are going to end the stream. I'll be back after 1 hour. Till then, take care. Love you all.